You're listening to
And such a short amount of time to do it in. We were really...
a Mamamia podcast.
Di dove sei?
Di Milano.
Di Milano.
Yeah.
Da Mamamia sono Mia Friedman e stai ascoltando No Filter, un podcast di interviste settimanali con persone che raccontano le loro storie in modo molto sincero e non hanno paura di essere tutti i tipi di vulnerabili. E la mia ospite oggi è Silvia Colloca. Sorry, just got a bit distracted, speaking a little bit of Italian. Oh my God, as if that came off the top of my tongue. I had to use Google Translate. I did live in Italy for a year though, in case you were wondering, which is why I was so excited to sit down with my guest today. She's an Italian-born food lover, opera singer, actress, and the host of our new podcast here at Mamamia. It's called What I Eat When. And her name is Silvia Colloca. Quanti anni fa?
Sono arrivata qui. I
Sì.
came here.
Oh my God, that's more times feels so clever speaking in
so
Italian.
good.
Sylvia wears a lot of hats and she hates being defined by labels. Not her age, not who she's married to, not how many children she has. And of course, I asked her about all of those things. But we talked about a lot of other things too. And the one label that has always stuck, food lover. And in this episode, we speak about everything from how COVID has changed her relationship
If there's something that we're feeling, we just deal with it straight away.
to her feelings about getting older.
It is so unfair to feel a pressure like that because we all bloom at different times.
Here is Silvia Colloca, the only guest who has ever brought me a cake. How many years ago did you come to Australia?
Okay, I became a citizen in 2012 and, I've been a resident for another 5 years before then. But we used to live in London mainly, so I couldn't really apply for citizenship
Why Australia?
because I met a boy.
It's a story as old as time.
I know.
You grew up in what kind of family in Milan?
Lovely, simple family. There's no bells and whistles to my upbringing. Mum and dad still live in the 2-bedroom apartment I grew up in, and they're currently in lockdown in the 2-bedroom apartment I grew up in. But I think that's part of the beauty of my upbringing is that I had to share my bedroom with my older brother and my older sister until we all moved out, which in Italy doesn't happen when you're 17. No. It kind of, but it was definitely gave me, happens. Yeah, exactly. But it definitely gave me a kick up the arse because, it became very small very quickly.
How old were the three of you when you moved out?
How old was I? Maybe I was 23 or 24.
Wow. And you were sharing a room with your brother and sister?
Well, at the time, because my sister is 5 years older, so she had already left and she was living in Sicily at the time. And my brother is a chef, and he was, in and out of jobs, traveling the world as a Michelin
fancy
chef. And then he'd come back and stay home with us, which was always exciting for 2 days. And then it was like, oh my God, I need to move out. But it was hard because, working and studying, and it's... it wasn't the easiest thing, but then as soon as I could, and it wasn't super soon, but as soon as I could, I did.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I always wanted to be a performer. I never not wanted to be a performer. And that was very clear on any family gathering because there was always a little show put on by me and my other 2 cousins. And so finally, I think when I was about 13, Mum and Dad decided to enroll me into drama school. And so, I started very quickly training to become an actor. And then when I was about, I don't know, maybe 20, 21, and I was already at uni, I was doing a teaching degree. And it definitely made me driven to the point that then by the age of, I think I was 21 and I had finished my drama course at the time. And I was still at uni doing my teaching degree, but definitely not feeling like that was my calling. I did enjoy the subjects, but I just had to give my whole focus to performing. And so I came back to my mum and dad. I said to them, so I don't think I want to do a teaching degree, but I've got a great alternative for a solid career opportunity. I want to be an opera singer. Exactly.
Sensible.
Yeah, given that
Much more stable.
I'd never been to the opera ever. There was like no history in my family of, growing up listening to opera.
Why opera?
Because it's me, and the bigger the better. So I used to do voice classes at drama school, and we'd do singing. And one teacher once said to me, I think there's a bigger instrument in there that's probably more suited for operatic or classical singing. And that was enough for me to go like, right, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I had zero music training, never studied an instrument, never learned anything that had to do with music apart from the recorder at school. And so I then, at the age of 21 or something, had to learn this foreign language from scratch. Most people that go into classical singing have a music background. Either they've been learning the piano since the time they were 5.
So you obviously knew you could sing.
Well, look,
I mean, opera is not just singing. Opera is very technical.
Yeah.
Singing.
I couldn't sing as such because that's a technical thing to do. But I had an instrument that had been identified. But of course, because I was, young and foolish, and I thought, oh, my voice is amazing. This is going to be a breeze. And it wasn't. Not just because I had to learn, to read and write music and the principles of harmony and all that stuff that I had no idea I had to learn. I thought, music was something that you heard and then you replicated. But no, in classical singing, you have to read a score and you have to identify what the patterns are. And I've always hated maths. Oh, with a passion.
Yeah.
Well, because I wasn't good at it. And all of a sudden, there I was. And what music is a lot of maths. And I was like, what is this circle of hell I'm in? So that was part of the technical part. And then it's discovering an instrument that sits inside of you. You can't see it, and it's so tiny. And managing it is so delicate. It's the instrument that gets broken more often. And that it was a 5-year course to complete. And then, again, it just had to happen. I was just going to do it. And I remember sitting like my music theory exams where I had to they play some music and you have to write it down. And I studied so hard, I like all-nighters, thing that I'd never done before in my life.
How were you earning money?
Well, I was
modeling
doing not model, but commercial
acting So that was paying for you to be spending all of this time.
And I used to teach children drama as well. So that's why I was living with mum and dad.
And you were living at home. You didn't have rent to pay.
No, I didn't have rent to pay
or food to buy.
That's right, mum, obviously Italian, great cook. And so I remember sitting for some of these exams and honestly working the hardest I'd ever worked in my life. And getting like a pass because it's a really difficult thing to do when you're a grown-up. It's like learning a language. You can do it, but you're never going to be super fluent. And so I've always had to work a bit harder to learn scores and all of that. And even to this day, and there has been a fair bit of experience under my belt, but every time I get sent a new score, my first instinct is to go like, I'm never going to be able to read this or sing this. And then you just go.
I'm glad you say that. That's imposter syndrome. We all have that, right?
Oh, absolutely. My God, yes. I had that a lot, and I still do, especially with my new career, the cooking one, because I have no credentials.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you grow up in a family where food was important? But because you're Italian, that's like a rhetorical question.
Yes. Well, for most people in Italy, I'd say that's just part of the furniture. And
can you explain a little bit for those who aren't familiar with the Italian way of life, the role food plays in Italian families?
Basically, every single life event from the, waking up in the morning to like big life-changing moments are punctuated by the food offering. And it can be as simple and frugal as a piece of bread with some olive oil or a more elaborate feast. But what those moments do is that they create the memory, they create the event. And every single family memory I have was always centered around food offering of some sort.
Italians go home for lunch every day, right?
Yeah, well, look, probably
Mostly.
these days. I don't
Yeah.
know if they do that, although I haven't lived in Italy for so long. So, but yes, definitely that's part of the culture, and it was definitely part of my upbringing. And we start school really early, like at 8 in the morning, and then we're home by 2 and have lunch at home.
And it's like a multi-course lunch.
Yeah, and look, it is and it isn't. I think that's part
Not
of...
fancy, but it's still like you have a pasta course and then you have a meat course. And
Yeah, not every day. I think a little bit of that is also part of the postcard of Italy that everybody loves, and me included, now that I don't live there anymore and I miss it so much. And so when I go back, I want everything. But the day-to-day Italian home cooking is so simple and unadorned, and if it's some pasta, it'll be some pasta with tomato, and then if there's meat after, it's literally just a piece of meat.
Exactly, yeah.
With nothing on it.
I used to go to my boyfriend's house and it would be that. The emphasis was on beautiful ingredients.
That's right.
But it wouldn't be like a fancy meal. It would just be, this is just lunch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we sit down and we have a chat, and it's a moment in time. And even, like, you know, obviously as a teenager being on holiday with the family, and the thought of it's midday or 1, I now have to go home and sit down and eat the food that my nonna has cooked. Oh, how boring is that? Because, you know, even Italian teenagers can be so ungracious about the most beautiful food in the world. And, you know, now I would just pay gold to sit down at the table and have my nonna's food. But yeah, it was an everyday occurrence. And I think what happened was that when I left Italy and lived in cultures where different was treated differently, and not to say better or worse, it's just a different food culture everywhere you go. I think I missed the one I came from, and so I don't know, I started writing about it, and I think that resonated with a lot of people, and so then it kind of snowballed into sharing family recipes and then creating this new career that I feel I'm a bit of an imposter about, because unlike my acting and music ones, I don't have training as a writer or as a cook. You know, I'm speaking up my mind and I'm sharing family recipes. And
But don't you see that that's what the appeal is? Because
I have to believe it, but I was very reluctant to begin with. And also, you know, I didn't spend a lot of my life with opportunities given to me where this was sort of really offered to me, like, do you want to do a book?
how did it come about?
Well, I started writing a blog, and unbeknownst to me, it sort of caught the attention of publishers. And there was like this mad week in 2012 where I received 2 book offers, and then I remember
There was a bidding war.
Wait for it. Then I Googled literary agents, and I found a literary agent on Google, as you do, and I emailed, all capital letters, help, I have 2 book offers, I don't know what to do. And so then they got back to me very quickly, and we chatted, and she said to me, just leave it with me. And by the end of that week, there were 4. And I remember being on the phone to my mum in Italy going like, I don't know what to do about this, because I'm going to have to say yes to at least one of them, because when am I going to do this? But we did think it was going to be a one-off, like, just put all the family recipes in there and we'll collect all the stories that come with. And it was, you know, my first book was very much that, like a diary of my memories and what food meant to me, and growing up in Italy and finding my cooking voice in a kitchen in Sydney, talking about my upbringing. But obviously that wasn't destined to be the last one, so it caught me unprepared. But then I realised that I had an opportunity that I had to take, and the reason why I felt like it was a life-changing opportunity was that it very quickly connected me to a lot of people that wanted to share their stories with me.
About food.
About food, about family, about being migrants, about missing their families. And they weren't necessarily Italian people, because we all have a bit of a migrant story. And I have been connected with people that I've never met for the longest time now, since, I guess, 2013 or something. And it's really enriched me so, so deeply. I know that social media is often in the spotlight because of its darker sides, but I've only been exposed to the brighter ones. And it's amazing the conversations that something as simple as a loaf of bread can inspire. And to be able to connect with people that are so willing to share all of that with me. They send me family photos of their gatherings whilst, someone has made one of my recipes. Or
that must feel great.
It's just really beautiful. It's just really beautiful. I don't take it for granted. And because of social media, people can reach out to me, and as much as I can, I do try to reply because I want to. It's impossible to reply to everyone, but if I see the messages, if they're not filtered by a spam filter or something, I will get back because I need to thank them. I just find that it's really made my life so much richer, and I've discovered so many recipes.
We've jumped because you moved to the UK to pursue your singing and your acting. You met a boy. You took the decision to move to Australia with him, or
he's
as part
Australian,
of that relationship. Tell me about the decision to move.
Well,
what did you know about Australia?
Well, funnily enough, I used to dream about living in Australia when I was a child.
Why?
I know. Well, why? Because it's a magnificent
But what did you
country.
know of Australia?
Well, not much. What I knew about Australia was through this Japanese cartoon series called Lucy May, which is about this English girl and her family a few centuries ago who migrated to make a life in Australia. And it was like this saga, this Japanese cartoon that went on for months, and everybody in primary school would watch it. And I discovered, the beautiful landscapes and the animals, and I was completely fascinated. And I remember, dreaming of one day, moving to this land far, far away and having a strawberry plantation for some reason, which I still haven't managed to because I have tried to grow strawberries and the birds get them first. But
so you dreamed about Australia, and then you met this Australian guy.
And then I met this Australian guy, and
Did you know he was going to be the one? I always love hearing the backstory after.
I didn't know he was going to be the one. We had both just come out of difficult breakups, and I don't want to say that I thought, this will be just a fun on-set fling, but that's sort of how...
Because you were working together.
We were working together, and that's how it started. But we went on our first date, and our first date lasted a few months. Like, we never left each other. So it was like 2 weeks into that first date, we looked at each other going like, are you feeling what I'm feeling? And I'm like, I think so.
Was he the first Australian guy you dated?
Yes.
What was your impressions of Australians via him?
I couldn't understand the accent. I thought I could speak, good enough English, and all of a sudden I was like, what is these things you're saying to me? And he taught me all kind of, rude Australian phrases.
Because Richard has a broad Australian accent.
He actually doesn't. I think sometimes he puts it on
that's true,
for work because of being an actor and playing
and
roles.
That he's played.
But he loved to, to teach me really rude Australian expressions and not telling me that they were rude so that then I would say them out loud in front of people.
Can you think of one? Can you remember one?
Can I?
Yes, please. Safe
Okay.
space.
It's as dry as a nun's nasty.
Nun's nasty, yeah. It's as dry as a nun's nasty.
It's good, eh?
That's a terrible expression when I think about it now. It's so Australian.
Pretty terrible. I'm pretty sure it's not true.
And the decision to move to Australia for love, or to move to any country for love, is a big one.
It is a big one. We were already married at the time, but we were mostly living in the UK. And we used to come to Australia if he had work. He'd come here and then I'd join him and, we hang with his family. We do the fancy thing where we do 6 months in Europe and then we'll have a Christmas in Australia and all of that stuff.
Did that work for your career?
The move to Australia? No. It didn't. It was at a time, I think it was about 2008, and we were living in the UK and the GFC hit so hard that we basically couldn't afford to be there anymore. And the sure way ahead was to make a life in Australia, which of course was very good for him because he could work. And I didn't even have a work permit. I wasn't a resident at the time. And it wasn't just that. It was also that, I had to start from scratch again, and no one knew me and no one knew what I could do and what I couldn't do, and I had to learn to speak better English as well, I suppose. It's this thing where, because I was so close to Italy when I was in the UK and I could always go back and feel that safety net, but when you're so far away from your country of origin and your whole life is in another language, I realized that it's one thing to be fairly fluent in a language. It's another thing to be yourself in another language.
Yes.
And I think for a while I felt like I couldn't make friends because I couldn't speak properly, from my heart, or
Things like humour and irony and sarcasm and
and we
slang.
do it differently in Italy as well. So
Yeah.
it's like it's this kind of clash of cultures that.
What do you mean you do it differently?
Well, we have different sense of humour and we use sarcasm differently, and even the way we sing with our language, it sounds like we're always either arguing or really animated, and sometimes it's just we're just talking. I remember
about the weather.
being on the phone to my sister and then hanging up and Bridget going, "Why were you arguing with your sister?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't. We're fine. Good. All good. This is just how we speak."
So there must have been a number of culture shocks like that and adjustments to make.
Yeah, there were. And, by the time we moved back permanently, I had a little child as well. And not having my family here was difficult. And also, the first baby can be quite isolating. I was okay. I didn't suffer postnatal depression. And I had a support network that was given to me by my husband. And it was beautiful. He introduced me to his friends and his family embraced me. And I took it all. But then you have to make your own connections. You can't just have ready-made friends. You have to work at it. And I just had to do it.
How did becoming a mum impact on your identity as a woman and as a performer?
I don't think it did so much because I don't know why, to be honest. I'm trying to think why. As I said because I thought I had a reason. It just didn't so much. And I am famous around my friends for making, really foolish decisions to go on stage when I've just given birth or something like that. I remember auditioning for an opera when I was 4 months pregnant, knowing that during the rehearsals I'd be 9 months pregnant. And then for the run of the show, I'd have like a newborn baby and thinking, she'll be right. Yeah. And then I got offered.
Was she right?
Oh, was it? It was a bit tough.
Yeah.
So I did it. But because I had to rebuild everything, I couldn't say no to anything. And I did that, and I did, unpaid short films and co-ops. And I used to go into, when they announced the theatre seasons for the following year, I used to look at all the projects and whatever was not uncast and think, okay, could I be right for this one? I would tape myself and send a tape. And I got 2 jobs out of that. Like, if you want to do it, you can do it, but you really have to want it.
You're listening to No Filter with me, Mia Friedman, and Silvia Colloca. You don't like milestone birthdays?
I don't like birthdays in particular, mainly because, and I've never celebrated birthdays.
Really?
No, but it wasn't like, as a child, it was not like something that I was campaigning against. It's just that I was born in summer, school holidays. My birthday was sort of either we were traveling down south or, it was Silvia's birthday yesterday. You know what I mean?
So it's not currency for you?
No, but the few times that I've made a fuss, that I've had a fuss made around my birthday, whichever birthday that was, I remember it with a little bit of anxiety around the fact that, oh my God, I remember turning 23, which is like, you're so young at 23, and just feeling really old that I turned 23. And then I remember on the day that I turned 27, I was on the back of my boyfriend's scooter in Italy, and I was just sobbing my eyes out because I remember thinking, I'm 27 and I am nowhere in life. And honestly, stuff that.
I think turning 30, I've noticed, is more of a stress for women than almost any other age. I've noticed that my friends in their 20s get a bit funny about turning 30. Yeah. Were you okay about 30?
I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
I could not care less about turning 40 either, because I don't want to put that stress and pressure on myself. And this thing about turning 27 and feeling like I was obviously ancient and had not achieved anything in my life, I never want to feel like that ever again. And I remember then the way I got out of that, and it was an instant, obviously, was to think with every birthday that I get, I have to think that if I'm lucky enough to be still here, like in 30 years' time, I'll look back on that day when I turned 28 and I was so bloody young. Well, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think age is another contraption that we're stuck into that has to define us. And so you're probably right. Turning 30 can be quite scary because that's the decade where everything has to happen, including, the baby making, the finding the right person. And
a lot of pressure on that decade.
It's
That's
a lot
good point,
of pressure, and it's so unfair. It is so unfair to feel a pressure like that because we all bloom at different times. I am a late bloomer. I definitely did not peak in high school. And and obviously felt, that was me failing my high school years. And I've completely reconciled with the fact that I was an A+ student and I didn't have the motivation. I found it later. At 21, I decided to do a music degree. If you want to do stuff, don't think that because you're turning whatever you're turning the following year is a stopper to whatever you want to do. Because maybe that's also, it can be used as an excuse not to do stuff. Yeah, I think it's this idea of the things that we're supposed to do and have achieved by a certain age, and the things that we're not supposed to do because we're either too young or too old, and the things that people that are older should definitely not do or wear or say. Why? If you have a problem with hearing those things, then the problem lies with you.
How's 2020 been for you and your family?
I want to say something a bit radical here because I am completely aware that 2020 has been one of the toughest years for people I know and a lot of the people in my family as well. And I've had some really rough times throughout. But as it's wrapping up, I think it's been internally for my own personal growth, maybe one of my most extraordinary years because I have just learnt so much.
What about?
About compassion.
For yourself or for other people?
I'd say for both probably. But I remember this was my resolution for this year. Not that I do resolutions, I don't really like them, but I just had like this intention, not a resolution, this intention. Something to better yourself. So I thought, this is the year I'm going to just use compassion, be compassionate towards everyone and everything. And, the first maybe 5 or 6 months didn't happen. And I could see that every choice that I made, everything that I said, is like, oh, this is really not compassionate. And so I really had to put the work in later in the year to sort of make up for what I couldn't do earlier. But it was also because of what happened to everyone and everyone being in the same boat, missing their family so terribly and losing family and not knowing what the future holds and home learning and all of those difficulties and levels of anxiety soaring. I never once felt alone. I really felt that was very comforting. The other thing that 2020 has brought me is that Richard and I just decided to take the time to talk, which we didn't really do because we didn't have the time. Guess what? All of a sudden we did.
Everyone had time.
And we didn't have the time, or we didn't make the time, and then we didn't know how to do it. Very different personalities, different upbringings, we met at a time where we were at different places in our lives. And so we never really fine-tuned the art of communicating well and expressing ourselves without feeling judged or attacked. And then, we go into like defend mechanism, and we just stopped that, not instantly. Not instantly.
Did you make time to talk every day?
We had the time, definitely. That was, we just basically, how you've got like a junk drawer with all the junk?
I do.
Well, we've got several in the house. I think, in relationships, there's often like a big cabinet of, I'll just stuff this in here.
So
It doesn't exist.
Years of it.
Oh, I'm not going to bring this up because who cares? It's just going to blow up into something bigger. Oh, I'm just going to keep this to myself. And so we just opened that and got all the junk out, and we sorted it one by one. We haven't finished, by all means.
That's risky because sometimes in the process of doing that, you just go, there's too much junk. And some people don't make it past that, do they?
Yeah, I guess so. But then at least you've sorted through the junk and you know
That's
why
true.
you didn't make it, And
Did you have to be careful sorting it through it? Careful with each other?
Look, I think we did a lot of being careful, and then we also didn't. And then, you have to learn skills of saying things so that, okay, I really want to talk about this thing that happened 3 years ago that we never talked about. But how do I bring it up so that it doesn't break us now? Because it didn't 3 years ago. I could stuff it in the cupboard there and it was okay. Now we can talk about it. And so what's happening these days, we kind of have this, it's like an unspoken rule. I'm just going to name it, like the name it and shame it thing. But if there's something that we're feeling, we just deal with it straight away. There have been moments where we look at each other going like, what have we done? Can we just stuff everything back in? Honestly.
Can we weld that drawer shut, please?
It was better when we didn't know all this stuff. It was like, it wasn't because we, it was clutter in our souls, in our minds, in our brains. It was part of the mental load that was not just afflicting me, it afflicted him as well. And yeah, there have been times when we'd just go like, okay. And then we were stuck because, lockdown. And, we'd be dealing with really difficult things.
And with both of your work, I
together.
imagine you were used to having built into your relationship time apart.
Yes.
Because of travel, which you haven't had.
No. Well, his work stopped straight away. He was supposed to be filming in India, of all places. So that didn't happen. So he was home from, I'd say, early this year until September with no reprieve. And I was still working, but I was working from home, which was also not easy.
Have you ever had that long a stretch together?
Never, ever. But I think we actually needed it. We actually needed it when we needed to go through.
You had drawers to sort through.
Yeah. Well, it's a long relationship and, 3 kids. And
how long have you been together?
We've been together since 2003.
And how old are the kids?
Rafi's 13, Mira's 10 and Luna's 3.
Are you finished?
Yeah, we've got a dog now. I think the dog is the stopper, isn't it? She ate the cake that I made for you.
Full stop on the dog. Now tell me about this beautiful cake and about how you found being a podcaster now as well.
Oh, yes.
With What I Eat When.
Well, okay, first about the cake. So I really wanted to bring you a whole cake. I make it in summer when apricots are in season, and it's my apricot and olive
Explain to
oil.
people what kind of... Oh.
It's a very simple apricot and olive oil cake, and the batter is made with warm milk and eggs and olive oil and some lemon and then flour, obviously, and then the sliced apricots and almonds on top. And I had 2. I made 2, one for you, one for me. Well,
I'll allow it.
For the kids, right? And the kids saw them come out of the oven this morning as they were getting ready for school. And they got very excited that there were 2. And I said, no, but we're only going to keep 1 because this one is for Mia. And then I went to CrossFit. And then I came back and there was only 1 cake left. Like Mabel smashed
The dog.
1. Thank God she didn't attack this one. But so you only get half because
Yeah,
if
of course.
the
Otherwise
2
your kids
cakes
would hate me.
Yeah, I think it would be really difficult.
What sort of dog is Mabel and how did Mabel get to the cake?
Because she'll do anything for food.
Yeah.
I thought I put it in a safe place, but clearly she's just a driven dog.
Is she a big dog?
She's quite big. She's I'll say it's a golden retriever size, and she's part golden retriever, so she's definitely food driven.
Okay, so she could get well up on that counter.
Oh gosh, yeah, and she probably really loved it. My only consolation is to think that it's actually not too bad for her because there's not a lot of sugar and there's
It wasn't
eggs
chocolate
and
at least.
It wasn't chocolate or
Yeah.
things with raisins. She didn't devour the panettone, let's put it this way.
My dog once jumped up on the counter and ate an entire challah, which is like Jewish sort of
Yeah.
type of bread, knotted bread, like an entire loaf of it. And then she must have got so full. I was sitting on the floor and she came over and brought me just a little bit of it to like confess. And she just put it next to me and just went,
Sharing.
and she just lay on her back and just in this huge stomach and just said, I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Have you enjoyed talking to people about food on the show?
I have confession here. So I had been an avid listener of the Mamamia podcasts for, I'd say, almost 2 years now.
And we've been Instagramming for about 2 years.
That's
you and
right,
I,
because
DMing.
as soon as I discovered them, I started stalking you, basically. And so I remember being in Italy last year and thinking, wouldn't it be good if I pitched an idea to Mia about a podcast podcast about food. I didn't have an idea, but I had like a dream, let's put it this way. And then I didn't because, everything happened in between and COVID and stuff. And then in August, I got this email.
We reached out to you.
And I just kept reading back to make sure that it was Mamamia and not like any other company. I was like, how do they know?
Wow, it manifested.
It did. And it delighted me.
Check out Silvia's podcast, What I Eat When. Subscribe, leave a review, and you will hear guests like Jessica Rowe and Lisa Wilkinson talk about what food means to them through telling stories about their lives. And we will also put the recipe for the cake that Silvia made me because, my God, now every guest who comes to be interviewed by me has to make me a cake. It's a new no filter rule. It's one of the best things I've ever eaten. And besides that, we will also put a link to Silvia's incredible podcast. This episode was produced by Leah Porges. The executive producer of No Filter is Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman. Ciao, ci vediamo.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.